That's why when you come to someone like Rima Faqih, if you were ever to sit with her, say to her, Rima, did you ever hear of the great woman who came before you, who you could have taken as a role model in your life? Woman who served this religion. Someone will say to me, but Sayyid Ammar, these women you're going to mention, they lived 1,000 years ago. Rima's not going to relate to any of them. No. If I can make their lessons contemporary, then Rima and all of us in this hall can relate to them. What do I mean? I have a sister, or I have a daughter, or I have a niece who comes to me and says to me, I want to be religious, but I'm too attached to the dunya and I can't leave it. I can't even see why I should be attached to the akhirah. I say to her, did you ever hear of a lady in history called Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh? Asiya's husband would not allow her to walk on the ground. He would make people carry her because he loved her that much. He even did not kill the baby Musa out of his love for Asiya. The palaces of the world were hers. I tell you, sisters, you will not find any of us in this whole hall today who will own as much of an empire as Asiya owned. She could have easily said, I'm attached to the dunya, I can't get out and think of the akhirah. But Asiya showed us very clearly that even if you're in the middle of the richest environment, sometimes this world is too short for us not to reflect about it. When she saw Musa defeat the magicians, she came forward and she said, I now believe in the Lord of Musa and Harun. Pharaoh came forward and he said to her, you're telling me that you're going to leave me as God and you're going to go towards the Lord of Musa? She said, yes. He said, Asiya, I gave you this whole world. She said, the Lord of Musa gives me the hereafter and the world. He said to her, but what's the difference between me and him? I am a God and he is a God. She replied by saying, the Lord of Musa is always awake, whereas Pharaoh can sometimes go to sleep. She looked at him, she was attached to the dunya. No, she wasn't. When you say, I can't leave the love of this world, I'm too attached to it, take her as a role model. She could have been attached to this world, yet at the end, what did she say? Oh Allah, build for me a house with you in Jannah. You could take her as an example. Someone comes and says, Sayyid Ammar, I want to be involved in the political affairs of my country, Australia. I want to get involved in politics. I want to change the future of the political environment. Who can I take as a role model? I say, take Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam as your role model. Fatima al-Zahra did not just stay at home and say, I as a woman am only going to bring up Hassan and Hussein and Zainab and Kulthum and nothing else. Fatima al-Zahra knew that unless the woman gets involved in the political world, then we'll have cases of injustice which may happen, cases of oppression which may happen. You as a woman can represent your community. Do not let any man come and tell you that politically you have no place. Politically, that Fatima stood up and spoke to the whole of Medina about those who usurped the leadership of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And she stood up and spoke about those who took the land of Fadak from her. Fatima could have turned around and said, no, it's haram. It's not part of hijab to enter politics. On the contrary, you enter to serve Islam, you enter to remove oppression, you enter and you're not compromising your values, then there's no problem whatsoever. Fatima al-Zahra's khutbah at Fadak is a khutbah every single one of you should have read by your age. If you haven't read it, then don't cry for Fatima. There's no point. Your tears have to be matched with research, with knowledge, with implementation. Read that khutbah of Fatima, your grandmother, the lady who held your religion. Read that khutbah where she shook the whole of Medina on the political scene. Someone comes forward and says that I look at the oppression happening in the world. I want to start a group on the internet or in my community speaking out against oppression. Look at Sumayya, the mother of Ammar ibn Yasir. Sumayya, sitting down, originally hadn't been a Muslim. She saw her son Ammar become a Muslim. She heard the verse, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. She heard Rasulullah say, why is the female buried alive? She began to cry because her two elder sisters were buried alive as females. This Sumayya, when she joined the religion, she saw Abu Jahl oppressing Rasulullah. She spoke out against Abu Jahl. She formed a group of women who were Sahaba of Rasulullah. She formed them to speak out against Abu Jahl and Abu Sufyan and Walid ibn al-Mughira. This Sumayya, Abu Jahl was standing on top of her with a spear. He said to her, leave the religion of Muhammad and I will let you go. She said, I'll never leave the religion of Rasulullah. He used the spear to rip the middle of her body into pieces. Isn't Sumayya alive today? Don't we have Sumayyas? Don't we have Sumayyas who are forming groups to speak out against injustice? Then there's a fourth group of women who come. They say, Sayyid Ammar, I want to be religious, but my family isn't religious. I say to them, did you not hear the story of Jamila, the daughter of Abu Amr, who was married to Hanzala, the son of Abdullah ibn Ubay? Jamila, her father was a Christian monk. She converted to the religion of Islam knowing her father was an enemy of Rasulullah. She didn't let her father's religion affect her religion. She didn't say, my dad isn't religious, therefore I can't be religious. She said, I'm going to join the religion of Rasulullah. If it means my parents are going to attack me, they're going to abuse me, they're going to hurt me, I have a Lord who will look after me on a day my parents can't. She married Hanzala, the son of Abdullah ibn Ubay, who was the chief of the hypocrites of Medina. A day before the battle of Uhud, they got married. The day after, Rasulullah announced that the Sahaba have to go and fight at the battle of Uhud. She said to her husband, go and defend Rasulullah, but stay with me for one night. When they stayed together for that one night, she had witnesses who came to see that they got married. After Rasulullah returned from Uhud, he came to her. He said to her, Jamila, I have bad news. She said, what is it? He said, your husband died as a shaheed in the battle of Uhud. She said to him, Ya Rasulullah, as long as he died in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, yes, he did. She said, how do you know, Ya Rasulullah? He said, I saw the angels come and provide him with his ghusl when he was alone on the ground. That Jamila could have easily said what some are saying today, that I don't have a role model whose parents weren't religious, and they were. Jamila is a role model for you. Her parents weren't religious, but she was. Then there are some who come forward and say, give me a role model who built a business and she got money, but the profit which she made, she gave towards Islam. I want to build a business like a philanthropy cause, and I want to give them the money to Islam. Some will say you could give the example of Khadija. No, Zainab, the wife of Rasulullah, built a non-profit business where she would make handicrafts. She would sell them in Medina. Whatever money she would get, she'd give to the Sahaba who were living in Medina. Isn't she a role model? Then there are other women who come and say, Sayyid Ammar, I want to be religious, but I want to be modern. Can I be both? Yes, you can. Why aren't you allowed to drive fast cars? Yes, you can. Drive the fastest car. Why can't you wear Prada and Gucci and Vuitton? Wear all of them. There isn't a problem. Why can't you live in the best of houses? Live in the best of houses. In Nahj al-Balagha, someone comes to Imam Ali and he says to him, my brother isn't religious because he's got this mansion now. Imam, tell him that you can't have a mansion because it means you will not be religious. Imam said, if in that mansion Allah is remembered and the Quran is read and Salat al-Rahim is enjoined, then that mansion is a wasila to getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who come and say, I want a role model who's modern but religious. In the Quran, the Queen of Sheba was the richest woman alive. Only Nabi Sulaiman could match her. She was modern without a doubt. Her throne was modern. Her clothes were modern. The way she lived was modern. when she entered the palace of Sulaiman, she began to walk on the water, but before she walked, she thought it's water, so she lifted her dress. It turned out to be the finest glass you will ever see. She said, if that is what the palace of Sulaiman is like, then how about the Lord of Sulaiman? What palaces does he have? She left everything to marry Nabi Sulaiman and join Islam. She remained modern but religious. Someone like Rima was taught for years, you can't be modern and religious. She was taught the religious are always those who look backward. They don't look modern. They dress miserly. That's not Islam, that's culture. Islam said dress the best way you want to dress. Live the best way you want to live. But make sure there's a balance where you know there'll be a day you're accountable for the way you lived, and the way you spent, and the way you talked, and the way you walked. Further than this, you notice all of these examples, someone will come and say, but they were 1,000 years ago. Give me modern examples. In the 20th century, we had women who were modern great examples. Go and study their lives. Study the life of someone like Zainab al-Ghazali in Egypt. Have any of you come across Zainab al-Ghazali? Zainab al-Ghazali was an Egyptian Muslim woman who was imprisoned by Jamal Abdel Nasser and later by Anwar al-Sadat. This Zainab al-Ghazali, 3,000 to 5,000 women would attend her lectures in Egypt. She would speak out against Jamal Abdel Nasser. She would speak out calling him Pharaoh because of the way he dealt with the people. They put her in prison. In her book she wrote how she was tortured in prison, but that she was inspired by a woman who helped Rasulullah in the battle of Uhud. In the battle of Uhud, there was a woman who helped Rasulullah when he was alone on the mountain. Imam Ali was with him, Abu Dujan al-Ansari was with him, and this woman was alongside him. Zainab al-Ghazali, she was inspired by this woman. Jamal Abdel Nasser put her in prison for years. She didn't stop. When she came out of prison, she kept on speaking out against the injustice that was happening in that society. Women were changing. She was empowering women. At the end, many women in Egypt come towards religion because of Zainab al-Ghazali. She's a modern example for you to use. Her three skins. She had the physical hijab, the social hijab, and the visionary hijab. How could I build a vision for Muslim women in Egypt? Ghazali was a visionary for Muslim women. Then you had a lady in Iraq by the name of Bint al-Huda. Original name Amina al-Sadr, the sister of Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. May Allah bless their souls. Do you know this? Do you know this Amina al-Sadr? The effect she had on women in Iraq and women around the Islamic world. In the 1960s and 70s, do you know how many Shia women in Iraq were miles away from religion, didn't have even the beliefs anymore, were affected by different streams of thinking? Bint al-Huda, as a visionary, do you know what she did? She didn't come to women and say to them, you are not religious, you should be religious, this is the way you should be. No, no, no. She began to write small books or booklets. These booklets, do you know what she would do? In the 60s and 70s in the Middle East, there were lots of novels of love stories going around, weren't there? So she would write booklets where there would be a type of love story, but the conversation between the man and his wife would be a conversation where religious concepts are introduced. For example, once she writes a story of a lady called Rihab and her sister Hasanat. These are two women in Iraq. Hasanat is religious, Rihab isn't religious, Hasanat is. And Hasanat has just been proposed to by someone who lives abroad. Bint al-Huda says that that person who's proposed to Hasanat would write letters to her. Rihab, out of her jealousy, would take the letters. And she wants to write to the person who's the fiancé to say that, you know what, I'm not interested in you anymore and I don't want to be with you. In other words, she was pretending she was her sister and she was trying to reject him. And she was saying to him that there's no way you're religious. You live abroad, I live in Iraq, you can't be. Bint al-Huda would say, but then he would write back saying why he's religious and why going abroad made him religious, why it helped him become religious. She then would reply by saying, do you really believe in God? He'd reply by giving her the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, all the philosophical arguments about why God exists. She then says to him, do you really believe I should wear hijab? He'd send her the verses through letter of why hijab is good for her. She would then write, I want to ask for forgiveness that I've been rude. He would give her the ahadith of Ahl al-Bayt about how you can be forgiven. Do you know how many women in Iraq changed? Do you know how many of these novels changed? Bint al-Huda didn't just give lectures and preached. She was a visionary. She used the third skin, the skin of how to build a community and build a nation, that after you die, people remember you 30 years later like I'm remembering.